من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, to the show, Think About It. Today we're going to be talking about something that is a phenomenon that has taken over the world. In fact, it has changed so much in time that today it's a very powerful entity. Dear viewers, I'm talking about the media. As always, we begin with stories and we share different stories with you before we begin our main topic. It's because we give it a context. And sometimes we know about the complexity of life. We know about rules, regulations, and policies. But as we grow up, we don't really pay that much attention or focus to them. And then when a young mind, a young child comes along and asks us why, or questions the very logic behind it, it makes us think. So today's story begins with a young boy, age 7. His name was Rayyan. Rayyan was at home watching cartoons on television. And as he was watching his cartoons and enjoying his day, his father walked into the room. And his father asked him to change the channel because his father wanted to watch the news. So Rayyan takes the remote and he changes the channel to a news channel. And Rayyan's father tells him, "Oh, no, not this channel, son." And he names another channel. So Rayyan asks his father, "What's wrong with this channel?" And Rayyan's father says, "Oh no, they're not good." Rayyan asks again, "Why are they not good?" And Rayyan's father says, "Because the other channel is better, they have better reporting happening." So then Rayyan asked his father a question that if both of these news channels are within the same country and give out similar topics of news, why don't they just work together and give everybody authentic news and whatever it is? And so his father, frustrated now that Rayyan hasn't changed the channel and is asking too many questions, he tells Rayyan, "No, these people lie. This channel lies." And so Rayyan flips the channel or gives the remote to his father so he can watch the channel that his father likes or agrees with or finds more authentic. Now, this phenomena of this channel lies, this channel doesn't share the news the way I see it, or within my perception. How did this come about? And is it actually true that different news channels pose the same item, the same news, in different ways, and might also change the story? That's the main question of today. And inshallah, I'll be sharing some stories with you and some actual research with numbers and dates, which might actually help us have a look at whether or not today's question of various channels, different news on the same item, is true. For this, we have to go back to when news began. We have to go back to when a newspaper, obviously today we have television media. Prior to this, you had print media. Print media is basically newspapers. Prior to that, what did you have? How did this develop and become the product of today? Now, long time ago, you can't really put a date on it, but you used to have people that were hired or that were a part of a government or an empire or maybe the king's advisors or consultants or the queen's advisors and consultants, basically people who used to work with the leaders of a nation. And these people would go out and announce things to people. Sometimes the leaders would announce them themselves. And that is how the populace within a town or a city or a country would get the news. But in 1556, in Venice, today it's Italy, but Venezia, the country that used to be before, it was a kingdom of its own. In 1556, they came up with something called the Notizie Scritte. The Notizie Scritte means written notice. So someone within Venice, it's still unable and hard to track who that person was, but this is a person who used to keep an eye on the government, used to listen to what was going on within different meetings or different royal announcements or what was happening. And they used to write down that piece of news and stick it on walls in different places within the city. And people would be able to read off and get an update and be aware of what was happening. Now, of course, initially, these written notices were probably about specific topics, maybe about what the king has said, what the king has done, or maybe something about a merchant or a businessman, somebody who was regarded highly within a community, and the news would be about him or her. As time passed, so this is 1556, in the 1600s, other countries, neighboring countries within Europe, all the way to Asia, China, and other countries, they started adopting this method of written notices because they felt that it was a good way to share information and let everybody be aware of what was going on. So when they went out and they started having written notices, a lot of people, now obviously when you're growing up in an environment where high school education does not really exist, you learn at home or you learn in tents or you have some form of a teacher or a counselor who teaches you and imparts knowledge, or you become an apprentice at a workshop and you work your way until you become a skilled employee or a master who could actually go forward with that skill. So at this time, a lot of people who had the knowledge and the ability to write, a lot of people who knew how to communicate using a pen, pencil, or whatever type of equipment they used in order to write things down and give them to people, everyone started writing written notices, which later on transgressed or developed and became newspapers. So everyone would start writing newspapers, and this information would be spread out within the entire kingdom, the city. Other countries and other kingdoms would find out about what this kingdom was up to, what this land was up to, or what this country was up to. And so news used to flourish quite fast. And that was the medium of doing it. Initially, this was something that was respected, encouraged, and even praised by leaders. But then, when leaders made a mistake, or when they indulged in something that was not fair or injustice, or did something that was completely illegal, those things would also show up on the newspapers and written notices. So, when that started happening, leaders became furious. They became angry at those people that wrote these written notices, these articles, these newspapers. And they started prosecuting them. They started hunting them. They started killing them. Because they were making their image look bad. And maybe for those viewers who know about the history of Europe, who know about the history of North America, about China, about the Orient itself, and the different continents and what we learn from history, you might have heard of stories of various political figures or heads of nations that indulged in bad things and that spread hate amongst people, or that came up and imposed certain decisions and laws which were unfair. How do we know about this? How did we get this information? Because of those journalists. Yes, dear viewers, those people in the 1500s and 1600s were the first face of journalism. So they went out and they gave you this news. When they were prosecuted, instead, what the leaders thought was that once we prosecute them, everybody's going to be quiet and be scared. Instead, what ended up happening was everybody started writing a newspaper, or used to have different and various people who used to come up with news. So you'd prosecute somebody, and then somebody else would write about this person's prosecution by the leadership. So they couldn't control it. Those governments or those hierarchies, that monarchy, that empire, couldn't control this newfound journalistic way of making everybody aware. This went on for quite a few years. In fact, the media became quite powerful because it now gave people a voice. It now actually uncovered those questions and those queries and those concerns that people had about their leadership. So what leaders tried to do is they actually thought, and they said that these people are focusing on us because of these written notices in newspapers. Why don't we try to divert their attention? So they started paying and bribing journalists of that time to write about other things, or not write about me, or write something false about me that praises me and makes me feel good about myself and makes me look good too. In about the 19th century, I'm talking about 1800 onwards, a person in the United Kingdom by the name of Alfred Harmsworth. This person capitalized on how media works. He went out and got sponsorships. That means he got people to pay him to be a part of his news. And he used to talk about sports and other things as well. If you look at the early 1900s and the late 1800s, in New York itself, there was something called yellow journalism. So there were yellow pages which used to talk about sports. So it used to keep people away from leadership and make them focus on sports. Now, this was an initial plan to make people look away from what's happening at the top. But what ended up happening is that people actually ended up developing an interest for sports, for other things. Those children who did not have any knowledge of what sports were from a small village or town ended up understanding what this faceted platform is. Many of those people went into sports. So it was quite beneficial, you could say. So it did form to be a benefit. But did it take away from the actual sight of what was happening? This theory could be correct, and it could also be false. I leave that for you to decide. Now, let's come to the 1900s, the 20th century. We've talked about when it began, how it developed, what it became, the struggles that were in the beginning. So you have written notices, they were praised, and then when something false about a king or a leader came out, people were prosecuted because of it. But then it grew even further because someone else would come out with a new piece of news. And so the empires and leaders understood that they couldn't really take control of this. Of course, some countries today do control, but not everybody, because media has definitely become vibrant. Vibrant means that a media has basically a license, in a hypothetical term, to have a voice of its own. Whether this voice is authentic or not, we're still getting there. So journalists, now uncontrollable by governments and leaders, they started getting pampered. Pampered means that they were given gifts and bribes, and they were told that they were big people. They were given high seats as well, and they were given a lot of money too. And these people were treated like celebrities today. So a journalist was in fact a celebrity, especially when television media came out and journalists had a face and you could see who they were. People on the streets, when they would find a journalist, they would stop, they would salute the person, they would want to get his autograph. And in today's time, with mobile phones and cameras, people used to take selfies with them or post pictures on all different types of social media applications. So basically, journalists have become celebrities because of the power that they have. The introduction of television media gave a face to them. Now let's talk about, we've talked about the development. Let's talk about the actual development of the content of media. We have some researchers that I'd like to talk to about. Some people who have done research from various universities around the world. So I have with me the research of 3 different people. One person from Europe by the name of Lada Trefona Price, one person by the name of Mara Mendez, and one person by the name of Solveig Stien from Germany. These 3 very qualified and educated professionals have PhDs in journalism. They have doctorate degrees. And their study was about the history of journalism and the development of it. And what some of them have talked about within their research, which I'm sure is available on Google, and you can find out what they've had to say as well. These authors have said that the government started to pay journalists in the mid-1900s so they could take their side. And they could promote the government or promote what the government was doing or hide any kind of discrepancy. That means any kind of negativity that might be within a government, you could hide it. And just broadcast news which is positive about us, so people don't have an exact idea of what's going on. And that is something that became a trend between media personnel. So what ended up happening was that when the first time in, let's say, the early 1900s, 1912, 13, 1940, 1950, when especially television media was established and infamous around the world, negatively or positively. What people noticed is, journalists, what they noticed is that if I get money from the government and I'm being paid a lot of money and I can enjoy my life, I just have to talk about good things regarding the government. I have to portray news which shows a positive side of it, especially if the government wanted them to do that. But then you have private entities that said, no, show a negative side of them. You have opposition parties as well. So in today's world where you have governments, you have political parties below them. Some countries have 2, some countries have 3, some countries have multiple. So what political parties started to do in the 1900s is they used to pay journalists to show their side of the story, or to show another political party to be wrong or incorrect or corrupt. And so the idea of corrupt media was born. When corrupt media was born, subhanallah, I'm going to share a story with you, but I'm not going to mention any names here. You can go and do the research yourself. In the 1960s, it is said that a media channel was paid in a country where there were 2 very big political parties and they were going at each other. Let's call one political party Group A and the other political party Group B. And there was unrest between them because they were opposition. They wanted control of the government. What happened is that a media channel released news that a person from Group A was killed by Group B people. Now this news spread out. It's available on television. Everybody's watching. When people from Group A, that political party, saw this news, obviously, they were outraged. They were angry. They were frustrated. So much so that they went and started fighting people from Group B on the streets. So much so that they ended up killing people from Group B. 2 years after this struggle, it was found out that that news, that somebody from Group A was killed, was not true. But subhanallah, till today, this is 1960 something, 2020, this country still has issues. It still has problems. If that's not a power of the media, then I don't know what is. That is something that is a make or break. That is playing with someone's livelihood. Now obviously, this is research that is in front of me, that I've done and I put in front of you. It's for you, dear viewers, to think about. Let's move on to a very, very, very contemporary, I'm talking about 1980s and 90s. There was a journalist who worked in North America for different very famous news channels. This individual also worked in European news channels in the UK and in other countries. And this person was admired. He was a well-off person. He had a lot of knowledge. And he had been in media for a very long time. His entire life was spent as a journalist, as a reporter, as an anchor person, as a presenter. That was his life. And he was quite aged. But what ended up happening was, in the late 1980s, he agreed to do an interview segment with a few young people who were trying to do a report on journalism for university or school. And he said that what I'm about to share with you is something that could ruin my livelihood. And so the students were like, what? What is it that you'd like to share with us? And so this gentleman, he said that I'm going to tell you the strategy of media. The media's formula of twist. And he said that when the media uses this formula, they can never be wrong. In fact, whatever they say ends up becoming true. And so the students were very intrigued, so that whatever the media says is true because of this formula. What's the formula? And so this gentleman, he said that the formula is called 5 W's. Now this might be a name that he gave the formula himself. Who, what, where, when, and why. WH questions for those people who are English language professors and teachers. Who, what, where, when, and why. The 5 W's. He said that the strategy is quite simple. You go to a certain entity or a person and you want to make some news. You've been given an assignment to make this person look good or bad. You go to that person. You ask them the 5 W's. Once you've asked them the 5 W's, then those 5 questions have to be true. You can make any story around it, but those 5 have to be true. So what you do is you ask the 5 questions, and then you sit at home or at your office and you edit and you make a story. And you make sure you put the 5 W's within that story. And then you broadcast. And then when anybody questions you how or why or what, the only thing the media has to do is go to that person who that story was about and ask them the 5 W's, because the 5 W's were true. What I'm about to do is I'm about to give you an example of it. Now, I would ask all of you to forgive me, because the example that I'm going to be giving you right now is very strong, and it's quite disgusting as well. It's disastrous, in fact. Let's say there's a young man, let's call him person X. And this person is a millennial, is a kid who has video games and lives in the era of social media and whatnot. And you approach this person and you ask them what their name is, X. What? That means what are they doing? So you find out what this person likes or what it is. You find out that the person plays PlayStation. And the person plays a game on PlayStation called Call of Duty. Now for those viewers who don't know what Call of Duty is, it's a first-person shooter. So it's basically a game which shows army, military, tactics, different things. You're a person who has a gun in your hand, and you're going around shooting people, and you have some missions that you have to complete. And there are various amounts of weaponry and artillery available in this game that you unlock, you upgrade, and you do God knows what. So the media asks Mr. X, okay, so you like to play Call of Duty. That's what? When do you play Call of Duty? He says, oh, I play at home at night, usually when I'm done with school or studies or work or whatever it is. Okay, so you play at night. Mr. X, Call of Duty, at night. Where do you play it? They say, I play at home. Mr. X says that I play this game at home. They say, okay, fine. You got the 4 questions. Last one is why? Why do you play this game? And Mr. X, in that interview that you're taking, which this person has no idea about, by the way, says that, oh, I like this game because you have different types of weaponry, different things you could do, different upgrades that you can put on these guns or these grenades or whatever artillery there is, and it's fun. Mr. X, Call of Duty, at night, at home, because it's fun. So I take these 5 things and then I write down a news article. Na'udhu billah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, and I told you that this example is not the best one, but it's one that should be an eye-opener. A new terrorist in town by the name of Mr. X. He trains himself by playing Call of Duty, a first-person shooter game. He plays this in the comfort of his own home. And he plays this at night. And we all know that at night, nothing good happens. All evil comes out at night. And he does this because he thinks it is fun. There's your story. It goes out to the world, everybody thinks Mr. X is a terrorist, and everybody's afraid and scared. And this person might be saying, I'm not a terrorist. No, that's not true. What the media is going to do is they're going to go to him and ask him the 5 W's. Did you play Call of Duty? And he's going to say, yeah, that's true, I did. Even if you get one of those questions correct, your story is true. Even if you put a lie detector around Mr. X and say, did you play Call of Duty because you thought it was fun? Even if he lies, they'll show that he's lying. Then, no, I didn't play Call of Duty, trying to save himself. You did play Call of Duty. But what the media has very skillfully done is they've twisted information. And they've made an article, they've made a news, and they've labeled someone. Now I gave you a very, very, very negative, a disgusting, and a strange example. There are also ways to make people look good by using the 5 W's. There are also ways of making people look bad. My question to you, dear viewers, just to think about, is that today when you watch the news and you're a part of a country, you could be of any national. Of course, different countries have a variety of news channels today. Do all the news channels speak in one voice and one tone and one opinion? If they don't, then that means one of them has the information slightly wrong or twisted. If that is the case, then that means that the strategy that's being used might have been used from a very long time ago. And today, many countries that are in a very huge, let's say, deficit or difficulty or have a negative image in front of the world, it could very well be because 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, someone said something using the 5 W's and ruined their image. And they're still paying the price for it today. Many people, I've seen many people from different countries, when I talk to them about their countries, and when you're just finding out information, whether you want to travel there, you want to plan a holiday or something, there are times when people defend their countries. And it's our job. We enjoy defending our countries. We're proud of where we're from. And sometimes you get to travel to those countries. So you see something on the news about this country, but when you travel there, the ground reality seems very different. The news might be showing you that you'd die if you go there. But when you get there, it doesn't feel like it. Good, friendly people, it's all right, it's a vacation that I'm enjoying. So it could very well be that today the standard of respect that we have for each country, a previous show I've done about stereotyping, a previous show that I've done about educational expenses, a previous show that I've done about the value of money, and all these different things that I've talked about, the researches that have been put in front of you. It could very well be that in some way or form they've been twisted, in some way or form they've been told in an incorrect manner, or it could be that all this research is false. You have to be the judge at this factor and you have to think about it. Now, this is all theory, as I've said. It could be true, or it may just be a theory where it stands. Dear viewers, we have to be careful. In what terms and in what sense? When we watch television and when we watch the news, when we watch media do its thing, we have developed certain biasness, certain opinions because of it. We've also developed certain channels that we enjoy watching and certain ones that we think are not good or useful at all. We call them irrelevant at times. We even make fun of them. But the main idea is that what is in common is what they're talking about. The contents within the news, whether it be about leadership, whether it be about businessmen, whether it be about stories happening within a city or a town or a country. Could it be that these stories are absolutely authentic? It could be. There are definitely journalism institutions today, channels, TVs, reports, newspapers, which are definitely on par and on track. But there might also be ones that are enjoying the celebrity life, taking money, and tailoring and changing news using a twist. Dear viewers, I leave that for you to decide. Think about it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Inshallah, see you next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.